Hello and welcome back to COM 285 Photojournalism. This lecture is lecture number 4 entitled How to Find Stories. So previously we have reviewed how to use your camera, how to think about composition and lighting. We have also talked about photo editing software. Um, so we've covered all the foundational levels of photography and photojournalism. Well, now we're going to dig a little bit deeper into more specifics. Um, in photojournalism, starting with again how to find stories. So before we discuss finding stories, we want to talk about what is photojournalism. Up to this point, we haven't really discussed what it actually is. We've just talked about the basic levels of photography. So let's delve into photojournalism first, and then we'll discuss um, how to find stories and also some additional things about writing cut lines and captions for your photos. So, photojournalism is a compound word here. If we break it apart, we see that there's photo and there's journalism. Photo, of course, being images captured using a camera. That is maybe obvious. And then journalism, information or story that is relevant to the picture taken. So basically, it means telling a story through your photos. It's just another form of storytelling, just a visual form of storytelling. So, photojournalists are visual storytellers. Just like reporters who gather information and write news stories, photojournalists do the same, but they do it through their camera lenses. So, as a photojournalist, you have some specific responsibilities that should be in your mind at all times. For one, as we talked about before, photojournalists are storytellers, and when you're telling a story or you're writing a story, you need to consider the 5 W's: the who, what, when, where, and why of the story. Your photos need to answer all these questions, just like a regular journalist. Um, when they write stories, they have to answer these 5 questions, and your photos should answer all of these as well. Unlike stage photography, photojournalists need to capture candid moments, real moments, something that is not staged or thought about beforehand or arranged in any way. You're capturing moments as they happen, just as reporters go out and cover a story and write it as it happens. The same is true of the photojournalist. We need to capture real moments. Anything else is unethical. Piggybacking off of that, we have to capture emotion. People are drawn to photos that have emotion in them. Um, as you see in the photo to the right, um, there's something about capturing raw emotion, and most successful photojournalists know how to do this. And so, a big part of your role is to capture moments as they happen, and hopefully within you'll get um, a great example of emotion of some sort. We will go into these deeper in another lecture, but we're supposed to be mindful as photojournalists rather, sorry, of ethical standards and subjects' rights. So you should always think about, am I telling the truth within my photos? Am I portraying this person in the correct light? Um, am I violating any of their rights by photographing them? These are things that we have to think about constantly as photojournalists. So, again, we will go into these more in depth later, but just as a primer, I just want to let you know that you should be thinking about these things as a photojournalist. You should also be a people person. Communicate with your subjects. Not everybody can do this naturally. Not everybody can communicate with people easily. This is something that has to be worked on and honed over time. But if you want to be a successful photojournalist, you have to be comfortable talking to people. There's no way around it. You have to make connections and talk to people to get details about who you're shooting, the people that you're shooting, the event that you're shooting, that you're covering. You have to be comfortable with people. This is all, again, for the means of uh, gathering as much information as possible about the people that you're shooting, but also later on, whenever you're going through your photos and you're trying to figure out which ones tell the proper story, you're going to have to write captions or write cut lines for your photos that give more context to what's going on. So, um, being a people person can help you in all those respects. And you also want to make sure that you are shooting with a variety of framing, a variety of angles, and different subjects to tell the full story. We call that visual variety. You don't want to have the same note within your photos. You want there to be different perspectives, different angles, different um, just variety to fully tell the story. Shooting down low and shooting upward, shooting from above. We'll go into those things in later slides here, but you don't want to be a one-trick pony when it comes to covering a story visually. Another thing to consider when you're a photojournalist is that photojournalists must have a nose for drama, for oddity, for rarity, for action, and for human interest stories. So, all that to say is, in journalism, um, you want to showcase uh, something that that the viewer hasn't seen before, or maybe they might know about this subject, but you can show them this subject in a different light, a different perspective. Um, so always look for, again, going back to what I talked about before, visual variety, showing people something they haven't seen before. Also, to put a definition on human interest story, because you may hear that and not know exactly what that means. Technically, in journalism, a human interest story is a feature story that discusses a person, people, an animal, in an emotional way, something that pulls or draws the viewer in. It presents people and their problems, concerns, their achievements. They do it in a way that brings about interest or sympathy or any kind of motivation for the viewer or the reader to stick with this story that you're trying to tell. So, um, if you're going out on assignment, make sure that you're trying to include all these things within your work. The photojournalist must be acquainted with important as well as notorious people who break news often. So again, this goes back to your network. Um, are you talking to people that are in the know in terms of what's going on in your town or your area? People that can tip you off to different stories. You have to have your ear to the ground, as it were, to make sure that you are staying connected with what's going on in your area. And this could help point you in the right direction in terms of finding stories to cover. So don't neglect your network. Um, it will help you get stories in the long run. The photojournalist must have diplomacy and tact when covering risky assignments like fire, riots, rallies, demonstrations, etc. So, how are you behaving on site when you're shooting these photos, when you're covering these stories? Um, you have to check yourself as a photojournalist and make sure that you are, again, holding the utmost standards of ethics, um, making sure that you are not covering the story in a light or in a way that will portray falsehoods about the story, or you want to cover your subjects as honestly as possible, um, and not get in the way of what's going on uh, in the story that you're covering. You have to kind of be a fly on the wall to a certain extent when covering these stories. The photojournalist must be acquainted with libel laws, since libel suits can also proceed from pictures. So, libel, for those that are informed about it, it's just a form of defamation. It's a way that you can damage someone's reputation depending on how you portray them. And so, don't publish anything uh, that is false about your subject, or that would deliberately bring harm to your subject. So again, that goes back to ethical standards in photojournalism. Again, be as honest as possible in your photography, and don't damage someone's reputation deliberately. Um, and we will go into further detail about that in ethics and law in a later presentation. So now that we've covered all of that, let's get into finding news stories. So what are the methods and ways that you can go about finding news stories? And we kind of touched on a few earlier, but let's go into more specifics here. So if you're working for a publication as a photographer or a photojournalist, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be assigned a story by an editor, or given a beat to cover by an editor. It might be crime, or it might be a specific story or a crime that has happened that you need to cover, so on and so forth. Sometimes you will be given the assignment. In this class, you'll be given parameters and assignments that tell you exactly what to cover. Maybe not, maybe how to cover it exactly, but what to cover and things to think about. So uh, you might be assigned a subject, but there's there are times where you might give yourself an assignment. Again, maybe you are attuned to what's going on in your town, or on your campus, and you can give yourself assignments, things to cover that you see might be of human interest. So don't wait for someone to give you an assignment. Always be curious about what's going on around you. There could be an interesting story. And sometimes things just happen in the moment. I always recommend having a camera on you at all times, and I mean, technically, most of us do, at least, on our phones. There's always a camera. So sometimes stories happen while you are sitting eating lunch in the quad, or just driving across town. Um, Sirens go off. You see fire trucks blaring past you. Um, there's a story there, and so you have to be ready to cover whatever happens. So also, things might happen in the moment. You have to be ready for when those things happen. We're all connected to social media in some form or fashion. At least most of us are, and so things happen on social media. You might, get a series of tweets about something that's happening in town. Um, you won't get all of the details, but social media can be a way to, again, alert you to what's going on in town, things that are happening, and they can be a good tip off to all of those things. I wouldn't rely on social media to give you full stories. Again, they're just tools to help you, or to help point you in the direction of where a story could be happening. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. It's always good to create contacts and work your network so that you can be tipped off on stories that might be happening. Talking to the local police chief, if that's possible. In your case, as students, you might talk to the campus police chief, or some authority on campus that can, again, point you in the right direction in terms of stories. People that are in the know. Always work your connections. Professors that are in the know about a certain subject. Um, there's just a slew of people that could be within your network and can tip you off to stories. Okay, so we've talked a lot about how to find stories, but what does that look like? What do those stories look like visually? I want to give you a few examples of how photos can tell stories and what that looks like. So as a photojournalist, you want to make sure that you're doing your research ahead of time of a subject that you might be covering or an event that you might be covering so that you can anticipate shots before they happen. In this photo, we see the photographer is at the what seems to be the finish line of a race, of a cross-country race. And so at that perspective, you're going to be getting, people that are totally drained, ready to cross the finish line. And this person in the photo may be the first place finisher. And so you're getting that emotion. You've anticipated that this is the type of shot that's you're going to get if you stand in this particular place. And so again, doing your research and being in the right place at the right time can make for great photos. Once again, staying with anticipation, rather anticipating emotion in action. Again, being in the right place at the right time. Your favorite soccer team wins. You're in the locker room as they come in, and you're waiting for them to celebrate. And so you set your camera, you stay in the right place, and you capture an award-winning emotional shot. Right? You can't get that if you're just passing by. You have to be there and be ready for the moment when it happens. Same thing here again. This particular photographer is down low, getting this team's reaction as this game is happening, whatever game it is, maybe possibly a soccer game. But again, that person is in the right place at the right time, waiting for that emotional thing to happen and capture it. So again, you have to be in the right place at the right time. You also can use your photos to inform of a person's character or their personality. In this photo, you can see that this person just scored a winning touchdown, perhaps, and so you can see that the crowd is lifting this person up, celebrating with them. So again, that informs of what's going on here. This person again has possibly scored the winning touchdown for the game, and so again, this might be their star player, and we can read that within the photo, right? So we're capturing all this emotion, all this buildup. So again, this photo is telling that particular story, and so again, photos can do that. They can elevate a moment. So be in the right place at the right time. You can also use your photography to place your viewer in a specific setting. You can do this by getting a wide shot of the place that you're in, that you're shooting in. And so don't neglect those shots. Again, they can give your viewer a perspective that they may not typically see. For instance, in this graduation shot, your viewers might be in the audience, right? And so they're not going to get this particular perspective. So again, you can use your photography to tell the story of a place or a setting or a feeling within that setting. These should look somewhat familiar. Initially, one of our assignments or activities rather was to shoot environmental portraits where we have a subject within a space which tells a story of that particular subject. So in this case, we have this actor on stage. We have them set within a particular setting, which is the stage itself. And so you can also see that there's a rule of thirds happening here. The actor is placed within will be the left third of the shot, And if we were to place horizontal and vertical lines there, two horizontal and two vertical, as we've seen in the rule of thirds, he would be placed over those intersecting lines. And so, again, this is a tool that we can use to give the viewer a perspective of what's going on in the scene, or quite literally establish the scene for them. Um, it's a very powerful tool. Do not neglect using it. Don't be afraid to get close to your subject if at all possible. I know in this day and age, with everything that's going on with COVID-19, hearing that statement might be a little weird to hear, but when everything blows over and we're back to normal, don't neglect getting close to your subject. This might mean that you have a long telephoto lens that you can zoom in and get um, um, specific details of a subject or an object. This might cause you to have to actually get up and move towards your object or your subject and get a tight shot, or something that showcases detail. So don't neglect that too, and it adds to the visual variety as well. If there was a series of shots here, let's just say that we were covering a swimming event, not only do you want to get wide shots of or wide establishing shots of the arena that it's happening in, or the pool that it's happening in. You want to get medium shots of the swimmers right before they jump into the pool, but you also want to get extreme tight shots. So again, visual variety is key. But specifically in this case, make sure that you're getting details of your subjects too. It can add to the visual variety. Don't forget to show emotion in your photos. Again, candid emotion is the cornerstone of good photojournalism. Uh, this is what people are mostly attracted to. They're so attuned to seeing emotion. Um, it's something that just automatically pulls eyes to your shots. And so, a good photojournalist always knows how to capture that emotion and be in the right place at the right time. Learn how to be there for these moments, because it'll make your photography in general better. Don't forget to show or capture energy in your photos. This is especially important in sports photography. Showing energy or capturing action can be a strong storytelling technique. Um, to do this, you have to make sure that you have good lighting, and more importantly, a camera that can shoot at a fast shutter speed, because you usually want to stop your subjects in their tracks for the most part. Similar to emotion, capturing reactions, game results, election results, witnesses to a traumatic or joyous event can be a powerful storytelling tool. Um, what happened at these things? What was the result? Sometimes the look on a person's face can be all the story that you need. Um, a terrifying. The loss of a game, um, more specifically, maybe even a championship game. Um, those emotions are going to be written all over your subject's face. Don't neglect to take these photos and capture them. Showing relationships visually, such as a glance from one cheerleader to another, can solidify a narrative within your storytelling too. If these two cheerleaders are sisters, and you know this from doing a quick interview or talking to them, when you're shooting them and they don't know that you're shooting them, little glances like that can really help solidify that narrative. And so don't forget to showcase these in your photos. Going back to what I was talking about earlier, you want to capture variety of an event. So sometimes One photo can do the heavy lifting to tell a story or support a story, but in many cases, more than one photo will be needed. So again, make sure that your photos collectively tell a story through capturing different variations in composition and in subjects. So again, if you're at if you're at a graduation, you want a wide shot of everyone celebrating the end of the ceremony. You want tight shots of graduates in the audience. And of course, you want those candid moments of emotion, a graduate talking to or embracing their mom or aunt or whomever. And so you want, again, a variety of different framings, perspectives, subjects within that particular shoot that you're doing. And so you want all of that stuff. Photojournalists should always strive to tell an accurate story, of course, but don't ever forget that you need to give the viewer, again, an interesting perspective to that story, something that they wouldn't typically see. And this goes back to when we were talking about composition. One of the compositional rules that we were talking about was perspective, shooting at different perspectives. So just to solidify that, again, give the viewer something or a perspective they don't typically see. So in this case, a bird's eye view, someone was shooting from the rafters down, and so they captured this interesting crowd shot with this couple dancing in the center of, and so it's just an interesting capture here. But again, it's perspective that people don't typically see. Same thing here, this worm's eye view, or some people say dog's eye view of the subject. The photographer is down on the floor, shooting upward. Again, it makes for an interesting composition because this isn't a view that people typically see. So again, it adds to the visual interest of a piece. So don't always shoot the straightforward, basic shot. Go for something that's interesting. And finally today, let's talk about cut lines and captions. Another job of the photojournalist is to gather information for cut lines and captions, especially if you're working for a publication, whether that's on the web or print publication. They're going to want extra context to what you shot. So let's talk about these. So cut lines are simply present tense sentences. They identify who in the picture or the who in the picture, their title, if applicable, um, Dr. Geis, President Geis, whatever their title is. Usually you have that in the subject or in the caption, and provide context of what the subject or subjects is doing in the photo. So this particular caption was taken from this photo was taken during the Black Lives Matter movement, and the caption for it reads as follows. Aisha Evans being detained by law enforcement officers at a Black Lives Matter protest in 2016 outside the headquarters of the Baton Rouge Police Department. So again, we're answering all those questions here. We have the who, we have what's happening, we have the where. So it's giving all this extra context of what's happening in the photo. The photo alone, albeit a very dramatic and strong photo, needs context. We need to know exactly what's going on, who's involved. So therein lies the importance of cut lines. It gives us all the context that we need to really completely tell the full story. Captions typically are longer in length than a cut line, and because they usually contain much more information than a cut line. And just like cut lines, they need to include the who, the what, the when, where, why, and how, and usually sometimes there will be a quote within that caption. Both captions and cut lines require investigation to do properly. So again, you're gonna have to be talking to your subject that you shoot, doing kind of a short interview after the fact, or even before, just to get information of who they are, their titles, so on and so forth, what's happening in the event that you're covering them in, so on and so forth. So you almost, as a photojournalist, you almost have to do two jobs here: capturing the story visually, but also gathering information to give more context after the fact. So when you're writing captions and cut line, again, you want to investigate every picture as it's being taken. So when you're taking them, what's happening in the background, what's happening to the subject, take all this information in so that you can properly cover it. Um, Photographers should be reporters too, as I said earlier, and they should be expected and prepared to gather this information. So, being a photojournalist isn't just going out and shooting photos; it's gathering information. So make sure that you set aside time to talk to your subjects in the photograph. Again, you can't tell the full story unless you're getting this information. Um, Subjects' names, their titles, so on and so forth. Same thing we talked about earlier. And when writing, provide the when, the where, the why, the how, the photo, or of the event. That ends lecture 4, how to tell stories or find stories. The next lecture will deal with law and ethics of photojournalism, as I discussed earlier. Um, your composition and lighting assignments are coming up. The due date for those, again, are Monday, March 30th at 11:30 p.m. And we're going to try something new here. I'm going to attempt to have a Zoom critique. And so I will give you guys I believe it works, where I have to supply a link to you guys to the Zoom meeting. And that'll be March 31st at class time. So be prepared to get that link, so that we can critique the photos that you have taken. Um, Make sure that you are logging your photos. What I'll probably do is have another screen next to me with your photos, and we'll just scroll through and we'll look at your photos and have a discussion. Till then, try to be safe and be well, and I will see you at the critique.